Guys, it's Wednesday, September 28th, and quite the day. Every day, a little bit of an exciting show. Let's get into what's going on in the markets today. And then I'm going to actually talk about Iron Mountain. Iron Mountain is, on days like today, there's macro news flow that's pushing the markets up more than anything. But ultimately, because the volatility, I suspect, will continue onward through the end of the year, you just want to you want to have done your research if you're a fundamental person or a value person, and you want to be ready to go ahead and take opportunities where they exist. And so Iron Mountain is one that I think is interesting from a dividend perspective that you just want to keep on the radar screen. It got beat up fairly recently because people didn't like their newest endeavor. I think that's really unfair personally, given what the market's doing. And so, but we want to kind of watch it closely here, and I'll show you why. Before that, though, let's go ahead and just set the stage of what's happening today, September 28th. Past performance, it's not indicative of future returns. If we look at the indices, because of the cut from the Bank of England, we are seeing the markets give us a little bit of a breather on the red days, and crude oil is up 3.66%. Now, more than one person has asked me, how do you feel about this? And what I would say is that the UK is very different from continental Europe. And a lot of people have pushed me on this, and it's been, I don't know why people get a little bit more aggressive than they should sometimes. But I will say this, remember that the UK does have British Petroleum and Shell. Those are UK based companies. And as a result, they have a very different picture than continental Europe does, both as relates to agriculture and as relates to fuel. Now, if you just were to look at imports, you'll see that there is some crude importation. Now, everybody does that, okay, because you have to have enough oil and gas and whatever else it might be mitigated over the different months, and at different times you'll have different things that arise. There was a fair amount of various fruits and vegetables that are imported in to give variety to the country. But if you look at exports, you'll see very clearly the amount of crude that they import versus export makes them a net exporter. And that has been the case for a while, almost a decade at this point, despite the fact that some people sometimes get very aggressive with me in the back channels, and that's not really fair. And they do export out grains. Okay, so slightly more important, grains and other more like hardy type things. So as a result, they're in a very different circumstance relative to any other nation on continental Europe. And it's a really strange comparison because of the nature of the inflation, which is war related, as well as as well as just shortage related due to previous things going into the war. There is a very different way that the UK can play this. And I know it's not popular to say it, but it is the truth. And so I'm just sharing it with you that strategically you can come at this a little differently due to Brexit than you could if you're just a EU country doing your thing, so to speak. So I just want to throw that out there. And so it's hard to think that like all of continental Europe will also cut rates. They might, okay, they might. It's going to look a little differently on their economic situation. Really, I think this is going to be a test for the economists on how much they've just been regurgitating what others have said, because it truly is probably the first time that each individual country is going to have to think about its economic policy slightly differently relative to the actual raw materials that are in that nation, which sometimes the economists, even though they're great at looking at numbers, forget what each country actually has in the way of raw resources. Again, that's why we've been saying what we're saying in a very nuanced way about the United States and which portions of the economy might actually do okay, or might actually be in a little bit of a different situation than the rest of the world. And we continue to tell you, hey, we're very blessed as Americans for our amazing land, which is, by the way, it's not just a lot of land with low population density relative to other nations, but it's a lot of land with a lot of junk underneath, because we did a whole series of things, not the least of which was turn most of where the natural resources is into national parks. And then the rest is Indian reservations. So we just haven't touched a lot of the stuff that we have in the way of raw materials. Additionally, there is plenty of farmland here. It's just whether or not we can get it up and whether or not we don't screw up as relates to water supply in different parts of this nation. So we're in a different circumstance than Europe by a lot as well, as it relates to how we might want to approach inflation otherwise. So I continue to say that. I think that right now, in the next 2 years, you're going to figure out which economists actually bother to do the additional work of understanding what the actual economies are versus just being macro economists, so that is what it is. Sorry, a little bit of professional angst as far as that goes. But let's get into why Iron Mountain is on my list of names that I always keep kind of the pulse on. What Iron Mountain does, and they've been doing it for a while. They are the largest or one of the largest public. There are some private companies that do this as well. But Iron Mountain, you'll see on the boxes of a lot of copy boxes, copy ditto paper, that sort of thing. I don't know what you call it anymore, copy paper, because they basically do file storage or document storage or even warehouse storage of business office type documents, that sort of thing. And they've been moving it to digital for a long time, which someone corrected me on, and they were absolutely right to do so. But this business is now being transitioned into cloud-based data centers. Now, there's a lot of different ways because the word cloud does absolutely mean different things to different people. So technically, they have been a cloud-based service for some time, but now with some of the newer technologies and how you would then do data recall, et cetera, it's a little bit of a different animal. Nonetheless, this is one of the larger global footprint companies. If you're a multi-international company, or you're any company that's just doing, that has offices in more than one place. And what they've been doing systematically is just upselling and then transitioning the warehouses into data centers. And that I'll show you very clearly if you're looking through the numbers. What I like about them and why they continue to be on my radar screen such that I'm interested is because they do actually have a fairly significant dividend. And in markets like this, where people just want to puke out the baby with the bathwater, like I said, if we can all teach our sons and daughters that a high dividend yield is a very sexy thing, they will be fine for life. You want to look for higher dividend yields for companies, and let's just be crystal clear, for companies that don't have any trouble paying it. Okay, that's what we want to look for. Now, the bears are going to tell you the story of the fact that the management team doesn't buy their own stock back on the regular. And that's a fair point. And that's part of the reason. And whether they do decide to do that or not, we'll just put that to the left. But this thing does yield 5.3%. They're not going to have any problem paying it. But there's, and I'll show you the one other thing that the bears might have sniffed aggressively on. They did have an investor day on September the 20th, and you saw a massive sell-off associated with it. But when I listened to the investor call, it still told me very clearly, we're not going to have any problem paying this dividend to you. And that, I have to admit, is just sexy, like I said. Okay, so these are the numbers that they reported on the quarter. That was back beginning of August. Sorry, I forget the exact date. But you had 15% revenue growth. You're seeing that it's coming off the service revenue, which is a lot of this transition to digital, and continuing also to just think about how would I think about storage globally, that sort of thing. The storage rental revenue, this is actually storing physical stuff. That's a 5% up. But you can see as well that net income down, this actually, and I'll show you what this number is, this is not net income down 27%. They have some extraneous charges such that the adjusted EBITDA numbers and the adjusted AFFO numbers are the ones that you want to look at. And of course, funds from operations, we always want to look at for a REIT, real estate investment trust, because that tells you, given that people within the REIT world, real estate investment trust world, are buying and selling properties and might have to take charges in a particular way, this net income number is always going to look a little funky, if you will. This adjusted EPS number is probably the one you want to look at. That's up 21%. And that represents improved operating margins for them, which is just, all this is truth. Once you go through the numbers very carefully, you'll see it. Additionally, I kind of show you, they have on the mix of businesses, this is what we're seeing. You can see very clearly that it's just, global data center business is doing fantastically. The corporate and other business, it's just things are going fine. I don't know another way to say it. There's nothing wrong with this business whatsoever. It should not be down, 10% because of investor day, because at the end of it, again, like I said, right now, you're going to get a 5 and change dividend. and you can't like off of a company that has no problem paying it and will continue to grow. Okay, let's keep going. And, and in fairness, I also have said before, these people tell their story very poorly. Sorry, guys. I know you got an IR team that's working really hard, but some of the digging that I had to do between the Q, the K, it's very rare that I have to go when a company's doing this well, that I have to then swap back and forth between the Q, the quarterly documents, and the annual documents to get the story pulled out. And in this regard, I think there is a story here that investor relations could work on telling ever so slightly differently. All respect to a beautiful investor day they put together, but unfortunately down 10 tells you that the street isn't looking at you as the same way that they might be looking even at a digital realty trust, which also does data center type stuff, but gets a different sort of love and multiple associated with it. Here's utilization. You can see that there's still plenty of space in the warehouse for them to grow. That said, they will be applying money to capital expenditures to continue to grow where exactly it is that they're warehousing stuff, or more importantly, where exactly the data centers will be in the future. And that's just a function of growth globally. The last thing, and I know some folks are beating this up because they're like, well, growth isn't going to happen globally. Okay, maybe, but I want you to think about this idea that the physical world is continuing to become the virtual world. We're not, even with this situation that's happening, if anything, all of this need to improve efficiency is resulting in higher data collection, which is then resulting in global growth in these areas. If we were unclear about that, please do have a look at the video I literally recorded yesterday on Accenture on my YouTube channel, and you will see that this is just a trend. Accenture's not having any kind of problem digitizing companies for a reason, because that's just the movement of where the puck is going to. So we still see a lot of ability to continue to grow into the spaces that they have, that nonetheless, these are multi-year projects, so they are doing some CapEx next year, but not more than you would anticipate. And you can see that as well. Shoot, I don't know if I put it, but a couple things I just want to note, and this you really had to dig out of the 10K, and it's this. All of our reporting units has estimated fair values exceeding the carrying values by greater than 20%. Our global data center reporting unit had an estimated fair value that exceeded its carrying value by 23%. In other words, if you take an old warehouse, right, and it's on the books for decades, you've depreciated, et cetera, then when you go to do some sort of book value, it's going to be understated. And that's what we're seeing here. You got cash flow on these properties way in excess of what they're on the books for. And that's something that I don't know that story is told. I'm sure that management is going to, if they ever see this, are going to be so aggravated with me because clearly they created this note, but it's just something that I don't think is fully understood by the street as far as that goes, or else you'd be in a different circumstance. Additionally, this would be the other criticism I had, was I was trying to break out exactly what pieces of business related to these continuing movements. And you have to do some really funky revenue breakout because they are in transition for how they're showing their numbers. I wish they didn't do that and just showed it more clearly for us so we could see the growth of that business line and why people are so excited about them. Yeah. Here's a reconciliation. So this might be a set of people that are pulling in data strangely, and they're seeing reported EPS down 25%. Here's the breakout of it. And you can see that some of it has to do with benefits that were on some of the dispositions of real estate that hit in 2021. Now they've disposed of it. So it looks a particular way. That always happens with real estate. That's why we look at FFO, adjusted FFO, and then just double check that they didn't jump anything strange in there. And we always look at the adjusted numbers and just compare. But overall, there is nothing wrong with this company. Last thing I'd say is, if this is their funds from operation, even after paying the dividend, then you can kind of see that there's not going to be any problem paying the 61-cent quarterly dividend. They're way over that and making significantly more to pay all of us, the shareholders. That's what this currently equates to, is 61 cents a quarter. So, I just want you to keep this on your radar screen. If this thing gets today with the entire market green, am I a net buyer out there? No, because I don't, first of all, this is corresponding with month end. month end has already net buying oftentimes happening or net selling. So I guess they decided to do net buying this month. And then you've got this wonderful announcement that also in theory is setting the stage, but in practice, we kind of have to see what continental Europe does. None of this solves the real problem, which is there's a shortage in food and energy that the continental portion is going to have to deal with. And so I would be a better buyer in market weakness of names that I want to hold for the long term. Iron Mountain, just want to watch for it. Oh, last thing that I would mention on them, and this is part of the reason why, the reason that it got sold off is because I think some of these numbers came in a little different. So AFFO was 10% year-over-year growth last year. So now they're guiding to 8 to be prudent. And then it's just like this puke out that happened, which I think 8% growth off of 10% revenue is pretty fantastic in my opinion, because you do have some rising costs, even if they are very much so a company that benefits from economies of scale. So I think that puke out was a little overdone. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop the share and take any questions that relate to this or anything, really. Hey, David.
Okay, hi, May. Great info. You've been in this business, what, 20 years?
Yeah, it's coming in on 20.
Okay.
They got them age. Trying to keep those wrinkles off.
These doomsdayers, I don't know, that it's almost, they're so short-sighted. I mean, like Goldman and BlackRock, who trillions of dollars under management, come out and get negative yesterday. I mean,
it's aggressive. You know, in fairness, I'm not ready to be too bullish or bearish. I think they were a little aggressive on their calls, but they, you know, like, what do I know? And like I said, I am still nervous about this quarter coming up. I think we'll see a lot of differentiation because, you know, there's it's really amazing. Some management teams have already been replaced because of this last 3 quarters. And some management teams have just been absolutely crushing it, clearly taking share and doing and some of the, you remember, you don't just get to at the S&P 500 level, some of the smaller companies have a different kind of basket. Like if you're a small cap fundamental person, you might see a different picture. But at the S&P 500 level, those are multinational countries. And so some of their strategy is really something that's been a joy to learn from, quite frankly. But some folks have been doing a fantastic job with it and some have not. And it's in every single industry group. So I'm not sure if they're doing the math and seeing that a certain, like, these macro calls, in a lot of ways, I think it's harder to be a macro person this next quarter than any other quarter, because you're really going to have some companies that are absolutely not just going to take share from other companies within the United States, but really other companies overseas. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can't kid, let's not kid ourselves.
You're talking about currency risk, right?
No, like, think about it this way. If you're Volkswagen, no matter what your deployment is, it sure as heck isn't in this side of the earth, because there's no way the US government's gonna let you have these big, gigantic auto factories bigger than what we got. So auto manufacturing by itself, regardless, now auto manufacturing in the US has its own set of mess that it's got to work through. Fair point. But, like I said, winter, we will know in winter what's going on. But in the industrial sector is a huge component of energy usage. And this winter, we're going to figure out who is going to allocate energy, how, and exactly why. But right. I will, but we are, like I said, the low cost producer of a lot of different types of fuel sources. At this particular point, we got plenty of fuel relative to other countries. Now, I know some people don't feel that way with gas prices. We get a little bit of a respite on gas prices, but with gas, energy, your electric bill, all that stuff. But let me tell you, if you just did a comparison by comparison to pretty much any other nation out there, except for maybe some of the Latin American countries, also are fantastic oil producers. It's just that they tend to export out to try to bring the capital back in to build infrastructure, et cetera. They got just a different mix of what's going on in their house, so to speak. But we are a very blessed nation. We will never have to, quite frankly, and maybe never is a little strong of a word, but definitely in the next foreseeable moments of dealing with this, we will never have to shut down our industrial production to try to make sure people can make it through the winter. I think that's what you're looking at. And as such, it's a different, there's every ability for an American company to take share. anyways, I think it's a really tough call. I think it's a really tough call. I want to see what strategically some of these nations do into the quarter. I've been really shocked by the innovation and the managerial acumen I've been seeing already. And then we've seen some real whoopsies, for lack of a better way to describe it. Everything from like modifying packaging, changing the amount that you put in a package in the case of consumer goods, to corporate actions that really quickly get rid of the businesses that are more commoditized. And like, for example, General Mills selling off everything it can in Europe because the margins are better outside of Europe right now, so that it can preemptively not have so much exposure to wheat and dairy on continental Europe. It's brilliant. You know what I'm saying? It's really smart. I don't know another way to say it. Got to give the man full credit for that, because that's what it looked like to me. Now, he sure didn't spin it that way on the call. Instead, he just called it upsell. It was part of their larger picture strategy to be more in the more fashionable areas, or the more high margin areas of food, packaged food. So they spun it as, people are working from home and they don't necessarily want to spend so much time. And so, packaged meals, that sort of area has a higher margin to it. But you can spin it that way all you want, but you sure did decrease your exposure to Europe. I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, it looks to me like what Powell has done. I mean, he got people rates down low enough to where everybody, you could refinance your home at like 2 to 2.5%, right? Then they go back up.
We do now have, I mean, as much as the bears want to say what they want to say, at where rates are at now, you could actually do quantitative easing. You do have, you put some, what you call it? The spring has the coil has a little bit more spring to it, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, he got 2-year rates up to 4%. So
yeah,
if you're a retiree and you have $1 million, you're gonna earn 40 grand risk free.
Correct.
Yeah, and
he did inflation.
And he created this little bear market has created great value for stock investors.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like what he's done.
I agree. I'm a huge fan. I see it. I see it the way you do. That's how I'm of the like opinion. That's why it's really hard. I mean, these people that just want the doomsdayers, and it's, sometimes with the big banks, an analyst might take a whammy for a reason that you don't even necessarily know. You know what I mean? Because like in theory, the Fed will always say, we do not look at the equity markets to make our decisions. And that is true, right? I mean, right. Chairman Powell is just really a remarkable human being. I will say as many positive things about him to offset all the negative people out there. But what he's done is really nothing short of remarkable. I'm a fan. He's given himself, like you said, enough room. So it might be the case that some of these banks are needlessly bearish, but they have to kind of do the analysis for where the puck is, not where the puck, they should be doing the analysis for where the puck might be going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not ready to give up on the United States yet.
The key is going to be earnings, which is your forte.
Well, let's see how it goes. I mean, hopefully, this one is more than any other earnings season. I would say that this one, I feel bad for the folks that really I still have a buffer between me and getting paid for being right or wrong on earnings. Whereas, if you're an analyst at an equity shop right now, I think this next quarter, if you could just be like, I don't know is my answer, and have people accept that would be the right call. This could really, company by company, this could go in any direction. For the energy companies, you might have one or two that just do something stupid. But mostly they should be just fine. I still say that the equipment companies are always a tough call. That's why I don't like, a lot of people have been like, well, the equipment companies are the ones that report first. They're a bellwether, the canary in the coal mine. That may be true, but we had a steel shortage for a while, so they weren't able to re-up. And then we had a labor shortage at the factory level, as well as all this other stuff that's going on. So, you got to listen very carefully, because some of the equipment companies are doing significantly better than the other equipment companies by virtue of how they manage their supply lines. So I still think that volatility is going to bounce around here pretty aggressively. If vol tries to make its way back down because of this Bank of England, on Friday, I will take a look. I think the next 3 days, you have a little bit of a rally, which was my concern about getting too hedged out yesterday and too bearish despite the sentiment, because I just wasn't seeing things trade that way. And on top of it, with month end, you get this really weird behavior on the last 3 days. So yeah. I don't know. It's anyone's call, David. It's such an interesting market. Like usually there's a much easier thought process, but this one, I'm happy to be like, I'm a little ignorant of what's going to happen. I do worry about the banks, because I think the banks one by one, it depends on how they're set up. And I particularly worry, as much as I love Goldman, as much as I love Morgan Stanley and think their businesses are fantastic, whether or not they're going to do great on the quarter is another story.
Right. Well,
I do worry about the financial complex.
The economy's humming along. I don't get the employment thing, to tell you the truth, but
How you mean? I agree with you.
Employment inflation. I mean, if that employee creates production, I mean, how's that? I don't know. To me, that's something.
If every employee is making more by virtue of having them there, it's a really weird circumstance, because the one thing along the lines of what you're saying, you've got a lot of new employees, right? And they have to get trained up. So it might cosmetically look like slightly worse production. And we do see that in a couple of the companies that have really discussed how they're thinking about employment. But we're going to have a much more skilled labor force going forward. And
Yes.
that is really exciting for folks that have a little bit of a larger horizon. There's a lot of really cool things that we can do as a nation to improve the current circumstance, because again, we are high stacked going into this crazy that's existing in the geopolitics. I mean, I wish we would just calm it all down, quite frankly. I like a nice, calm, happy market, as much as I'm an options trader, it's a little wild, but
Okay.
I'm more hopeful than everybody else. Maybe it's my positive demeanor.
Good for you. Okay, May, thank you.
All right. See you tomorrow. Good luck, everybody.